Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your hosts Sam Foote
and Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals.
It's episode 14 of season 4. Sam and I had a recent discussion around Microsoft Defender for Identity, a monitoring solution to detect unusual behavior and attacks against Active Directory. Here are a few things we covered. Why do we need to monitor authentication on-premise? What is Microsoft Defender for Identity? How do we license Microsoft Defender for Identity? And how do you deploy Microsoft Defender for Identity?
We've noticed that a large number of you aren't subscribed yet. If you do enjoy our podcast, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to us for you to show the support to the show.
It's a really great episode, so let's dive in.
Hey Alan, how are you doing?
Hey Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Ignite tickets went live this week. Exciting times.
Yeah, I think they went last week, but yeah, it's exciting times. Looking forward to seeing what's going to come up in that. I think we said last week, I think it's going to be based around AI coming into play, as that's the sort of key thing of key subject at the moment around the world.
Yep, Copilot, all the things. Wrap those large language models in every service, inside of every service possible. So, yeah, it'd be good to see what else, what innovations we get out of there. As we know, through our sort of relationship with Microsoft, the amount of features and new functionality that they churn out like a factory, right? Just constantly. So. Yeah, and Ignite is usually a pretty good one for us in our space, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I expect we'll see some of them coming to public preview. Hopefully some of them at least, if not entering private preview, where we can potentially access them. So yeah, it'll be good to start seeing some of them, because I think we've had some insights into like Microsoft 365 Copilot. And some of the pricing and things like that, but I don't think we've seen too much around some of the others. So it would be good to get some more insights.
Yeah, definitely. So, Defender for Identity this week, Alan, a topic that is pretty close to us.
Yeah, it's identity. It's you don't deal with it every day. It's more the cloud security side of things, but identity is the new front door. So.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
New perimeter.
Yeah, and what's quite interesting about this one as well is because it's obviously an Azure focused podcast, right? But this is sort of connecting older approaches to sort of newer technologies, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, let's jump straight in. So you mentioned. You mentioned previously that it's around Active Directory. So could you just give us a primer on what Active Directory is?
Yeah, sure. So Active Directory has been around for a very long time. I can't remember how long it's been. But in effect, it is a identity provider that's been widely used in the world with Windows devices, in Windows sort of infrastructure. So it's used to authenticate users and devices and control access to network resources. So this is logging onto your machine in the office, could be accessing a file share or a server, or even accessing applications that point at Active Directory to do their authentication. There's various things that there's like a couple. You can have a couple of servers of them. You can have them distributed across your organization, depending on your sites to make sure the authentication is local kind of thing. But they all replicate themselves, so it's all like one directory. It's like a phone book in effect. That's probably a good way to sort of show it. It's a directory with all of your users and their information. Maybe their phone numbers, things like that. Their work phone numbers. And then how does it compare to like Azure Active Directory or Microsoft Entra ID? It's in effect, it's the Entra ID is the the new version of it, the cloud version. So it's just and you have tools in place like Azure AD Connect, which I think it's still called that at the moment, to synchronize the identities between your cloud version and your on-premise. So you then start having a hybrid identity in effect there.
And how prevalent is Active Directory in organizations? Is it something that they're looking to move away from, or is is it sort of a legacy technology, so to speak, or?
So it's probably it's starting to be classed as legacy, I guess, but it's not going anywhere anytime soon, because as I said, Active Directory's been there around for a long time, and there's a lot of large organizations that have Active Directory in place that is maybe looking to move to a cloud-only world, cloud-only environment, using Microsoft Entra ID as their identity provider, their way of logging into resources, things like that, because a lot of our resources are now SaaS applications, but they're probably on that journey, and that's what that's what I see a lot. There's only probably only things like not new starters, but new startups, things like that, where they don't have anything. If they've not got Active Directory, then they tend to not need it because they're not building legacy infrastructure, on-premise infrastructure at that point. So it's probably a move to where organizations can go to the cloud, because that's probably one thing to say, is that if you're not able to put your resources in the cloud and you don't want to be able to allow authentication on premise to be from the cloud, it might be that Active Directory is still a key point that definitely isn't going anywhere. But like I said, at the moment Microsoft aren't, as far as I'm aware anyway, are not planning to remove that yet, and I don't think there's even any roadmaps for it yet. It's more enhancing Azure Microsoft Entra ID to maybe cover as much as it can that Active Directory does today to help organizations move to Entra ID where they can.
Okay, so we shouldn't, we should maybe think about it from a legacy perspective, in terms of we had the shifting workloads to the cloud. This is probably to draw parallels with that that movement that's sort of been going on. We've started to see some organizations have their primary sort of identity store in the cloud, right?
Yep.
But we're still seeing Active Directory being used a lot for different types of workloads. There's obviously legitimate reasons to keep those in play. So I suppose we should probably think about it in terms of a technology that we need to support and secure, and not necessarily immediately try to push for migration, if that makes sense, if it's not appropriate. It's more of a like you say, here to stay. So it's something that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, it's a very core. It has a very core service to every, or most organizations. It's not one of these services that are on like the edge of like your critical like services that you could go, I can just flip that out. It's like everything, all your member servers, all of your devices, maybe even authenticate against it, in all of your users. So it's not just you've got to start migrating services off it, if that makes sense. So it might be that you migrate your end user devices off it to be Azure or Microsoft Entra ID joined first, and then the user identity then is all authenticated with Microsoft Entra ID, but they can still potentially authenticate with stuff on premise. It might be things like that, and then you start to take services away. You might move an application that's able to maybe there's an application that is SAML and it's authenticating with ADFS. You can then potentially move that to Microsoft Entra ID to again move that authentication away. So there's definitely a whole. It's probably a whole episode on just Active Directory, really. And
A whole
potentially the
podcast
migration
notes,
thing.
right?
I mean, what we're like 10 minutes in, and we've already like started it.
Okay,
So,
let's get off Active Directory. But Active Directory important, TLDR, 100%.
yes.
So why is it important for us to monitor authentication? Focused on Active Directory.
So it kind of ties into what we were just saying, that it's the core authentication on your on-premise. So, if anything gets compromised in there, if Active Directory gets taken down, gets malware encrypted, then that is everything in your organization that uses it to authenticate gone. Unable to start up, unable to log in to it. All of your end user devices now not able to sign in. Because you might have, you might also have things like your Wi-Fi that uses 802.1x to authenticate against AD. All of a sudden people can't connect to Wi-Fi, and maybe they can't connect to your network because you've got 802.1x on. It's critical. So you do need to monitor it to understand potential attacks. And also, I think the latest stat at the moment is that it takes 72 minutes now from someone getting a credential to getting, an admin account and then potentially exfiltrating data now. And I think in the past that was like days, weeks, maybe months kind of thing. And, if you're not monitoring your Active Directory, you're not knowing if someone's in there trying to get around your network. Yes, if you've got your SIEM capability, then you're monitoring that sort of stuff. But that's it's exactly what we're saying. You do need to monitor it to see how an attacker or a bad actor is doing, maybe doing things in your environment, and trying to understand how you detect that as well, because they might be going really slow. Make sure they're not like peaking events, because you'll see that sort of stuff in a SIEM and things like that.
Yeah, okay, because so effectively it's our central sort of crown jewels, really, because all interaction starts with authentication, right? So potential compromise of that identity store is is a very valuable target.
Yeah, and because now in today's world we probably have hybrid identities, the passwords are then not accessible, but that password is then used in Microsoft Entra ID. So for your Office 365, where all your data is, or your SaaS applications that are integrated, so it becomes even more key, because whilst it's kind of talking about that perimeter, if it's all closed off, now your passwords that are now publicly not accessible, but you use them in the cloud, don't you now? So it's not just someone has to be local to use them.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So can you just sort of describe to us, what is Microsoft Defender for Identity?
So Microsoft Defender for Identity kind of came from a previous tool that Microsoft had, which was called Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics, ATA. And that was the on-premise version of Microsoft Defender for Identity. So that started off initially, and then a new version called Azure ATP, Advanced Threat Protection, came out, and then it got rebranded to Microsoft Defender for Identity. And there was always confusion about Azure ATP, because everyone thought it was for Azure because of the name, but actually it was for on-premise, Active Directory. So this tool is designed to monitor Active Directory, and it's looking for unusual behavior. So it's monitoring users. It's monitoring their behavior, and it in effect has a sort of a machine learning part to it. So it's building baselines on users. So it's in effect user entity behavior analytics kind of thing. So it's then able to determine that if a user logs onto this machine every day, and then they log onto then the next machine, that's what so that their routine is every week, every month kind of thing. Then it's baselining it, and then anything that sort of changes, then it kind of thinks, they've done it once, or they never connect to the server, kind of thing. Another part is protecting the identities and the credentials that are in Active Directory, and that's done by generating reports on the health of Active Directory. So there's some key things like one of the authentication methods, or not authentication methods, but the protocols that Active Directory uses is LDAP, and there's an LDAP-S, which is the secure one. So when LDAP is used, in effect, the credentials are in some, in almost in plain text, in effect, on the network. So if someone was sniffing the network, then they can see them, in theory. So it allows for hardening of Active Directory based on Microsoft recommendations. And then it gives you an interface to be able to identify these potential issues, create an instance and alerts, but also allow you to check across the attack chain, in effect, what is happening. So you can see a user logging onto a device, then all of a sudden an admin is now logged onto that device. Now it is now doing some reconnaissance against the network, checking to see who's in the enterprise admin group, which is a key group that's within Active Directory. It gives you, it's in effect, God mode to it's your global admin kind of account. And then you're seeing how potentially how an account is getting then laterally moving across the environment to then get the keys to the kingdom, and then causing havoc, because once they've got a global not global admin but an enterprise admin, they can create their own accounts, they can give it their own permissions, and then they can access other servers, your file servers, your applications, where all your sensitive data is. And some of the attacks that Microsoft kind of track or look for is like brute force attack against passwords, as well as skeleton keys, golden tickets, and things like that. So there's a whole list online that's sort of saying about what types of attacks it's covering. And what's slightly different, so if you had a SIEM, they're collecting the logs and gathering that information, and that's okay. And you'll be able to generate, if we talk about Sentinel analytic rules to detect that type of attack, because you'll have the logs to be able to determine what's happening. But this is doing it all for you and being updated with the new potential attacks, and the type, the detections are being updated automatically by Microsoft. So it's all like, I guess it's kind of like black box, doing it for you, being updated, and you don't have to worry about updating analytic rules and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of it quickly in a nutshell. It's very powerful. I've seen it light up like a Christmas tree. It's someone was doing a pen test where I was at the time. We didn't at the time. The team I was working with didn't know. They seen it starting to light up. Telling us this is happening. This account's been done. That now this is happening, sort of thing. And it was to the point where the team I was with were looking to, in fact, turn off the network or disable the ports that it was coming from. And they were going to the head of security at that time and saying, "Hey, this is happening. We need to do this. Is that okay?" And then he was like, "Meet the pen testing team that's over here." And we're like, "Oh, okay." So yeah, but it's really powerful to see it.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds great, and I think the sort of the key element of it there for me is that you effectively don't have to really manage it once it's set up. Is that probably a fair statement to make? I mean, from a a content perspective, you were talking, traditionally you might ingest your Active Directory logs into a SIEM tool, but then you effectively have to manage your content, your analytic rules and the detections that you're looking for at that point.
Yeah, I mean, there are still reasons to still ingest logs into a SIEM, because there may be other types of detections, and obviously the sort of correlation with other instance happening or other logs that are happening on that seam. So they can correlate against maybe another attack happening kind of thing, because you won't be able to do that with as long if it's a compromise or an attack on Active Directory and that Defender for Identity will be able to see that, but if it's an attack on a certain service or something, then it may not be as obvious kind of thing. So there's still valid reasons to still ingest logs. But yeah, you're right. If you're doing it for these specific reasons to protect Active Directory, then yeah, Defender for Identity just sits there and I say just sits there, but if it's quiet, then it's I guess some might say it's boring because it's not doing anything, because there's nothing happening sort of thing. But that's great, because it means there's nothing bad happening in your environment, if that makes sense. But yeah, the other parts to it is that you can create honey tokens and then in your environment, and then flag them up. All of your sensitive accounts, your enterprise admins, things like that, get flagged, so they get extra monitoring. So yeah, and it is a great tool. There's not too much configuration you need to do in it, because it's kind of based on collecting the logs. It's all kind of standard. Because it's been out for such a long time. I say a long time. It's like it must be like 4 or 5 years now, if not more, excluding the ATA sort of version of it. It's quite mature as a product, I feel. And they are still doing features to it. It's not just monitoring now. You can go into the portal, and if there is a compromise, it can actually disable and reset passwords in Active Directory now for you when it's deployed. So there is now actually a way to do the remediation from the cloud, or disruption, attack disruption at that point.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how it sort of how you sort of interface with it. So is this maybe we want to talk about deploying it potentially. Is this something that you deploy somewhere and then you access it from a cloud a dashboard or something like that?
Yeah, so it used to have its own portal, but with all the Microsoft security tools now, it's now all moved into the security.microsoft.com, the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. And there are a couple of ways to deploy it, and it's dependent on how much data is going through, or how busy your Active Directory is. So the easiest way, and the most common way, I should say, is that in effect you deploy an agent onto Active Directory, and that agent has to then talk out to the internet, or to the Microsoft Defender for Identity service, to in effect send the logs up to the service. But what it also does is it's also capturing the packets coming to it, so it can detect and read what's happening there. So it's not just what Active Directory is saying is happening; it's actually detecting what's being sent to it. What the reconnaissance is, and things like that. So it will detect if you're RDPing, if someone's trying to RDP to it, or trying to do a remote PowerShell and things like that to it. So not necessarily Active Directory specific, but someone doing or trying to access Active Directory domain controllers themselves. So it's part of the deployment. Once you put that agent on, that agent can get quite can take a lot of RAM and CPU, depending on how much it's processing. But it's got a fail-safe mechanism built into it, because, as we said, Active Directory is the core service. If that goes down, there's bigger problems. And even with the older version, the ATA version, which is now retired, it has a fail-safe sort of built into it, a cap. So in effect, it detects when memory and CPU usage is I think it's 75%. Once it's at 75% or 80%, something like that, it then restarts itself and stops itself to make sure that Active Directory isn't broken, isn't taken down, because it, as we said, it's a core service. So how do you then understand how, is your Active Directory like sized correctly to be able to run this? So there is a sizing tool that you run, and you do that before you deploy the endpoints, the agents. So you run it on a member machine, a member server or member endpoint that can see all of your Active Directories, domain controllers, or you run this multiple times. In effect, you run it as an account that's able to access all of the servers, and in effect, you leave it to run for 24 hours, and basically it captures how many packets, what's the average packet being sent to those devices, and then when it's finished, you get a spreadsheet in effect that then tells you. It recommends to add more RAM, add more CPU, because a lot of machines now are not physical; they're virtual. So it may be that you can add a few more cores, a few more gigs of RAM to it, just to once potentially size it correctly, because we have seen organizations undersize their Active Directory. And then once that's done, then yes, deploy the agent, and then it starts communicating and it starts collecting the data. Once it's collecting the data, it takes 30 days to do its baseline and learn. So anything happening in that is then captured. So you may get a few extra alerts at that point, but after that, it's then baselined all the users and what they do. So then the alerts will then be based on unusual behavior. But if you have a really busy domain controller, and I've done a deployment previously, and they were getting 580,000 packets a second, which is a lot. And they had and it was on a physical server because it needed so much RAM and CPU to run, which was insane. So for them, what you can do is build a gateway server. And what that does is that acts as the agent in effect on its own, communicating up to the service. And then from a network perspective, you do port mirroring, which means that you're basically copying all the traffic going to that domain controller, and then send it to this box. So it's acting as if it's being communicated with, and then it captures all those packets, and then it starts analyzing them, as well as you forward on your events to that service. And then it's all separate. And I guess you could use that if you didn't want to add or allow your domain controller out, to be allowed out to a specific URL. And then that sends up the data.
Wow. So there is quite a lot of flexibility in terms of how it, can be deployed. And, that just seems to sort of mirror and align to how important these services are, right? Because, and I assume that mirroring's done at like a network level, like a switch level, right? Is that just a...
Correct.
What do they call it? Is it just a port mirror? What's it when...
Yeah, it's called...
like a network tap or...
Span... Yeah, network tap,
span
port.
Span mirroring, yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, and you can do multiple. It's not those gateway servers don't have to be one-to-one with domain controllers, because normally you have like two in a data center. So it might be, and if they're on the same switches or close to, as long as you can add, if you're the server that's the gateways has multiple network cards on it, you can port mirror all the data to it, kind of thing. So it's not just you have to have another server for each. You'd have to like duplicate your domain controllers, kind of thing. You can just have one that goes up.
And that would make me think that that would mean that these the gateway identity agents that we've talked about, it seems like that would keep them segmented and maybe potentially hidden from an attacker doing reconnaissance, right? Because in theory they could be completely isolated, onto a different VLAN at that point, right? And just exposed to the internet.
From a box itself, yes, and you're right, it is a hidden like monitoring tool doing it that way. If an attacker got onto a domain controller, they got that far, then yes, they would be able to see the service running and potentially stop it. This is true. But at the same time, there's alerting on monitor. There's there's like alerts in the portal, in effect, saying when one of the agents or one of the domain controllers isn't healthy.
Yeah.
So you're able to see that it's gone down. But also, they may have taken one down, but the other 2, 3, 10, 100 domain controllers are still up and running.
Yeah.
And seeing, potentially seeing stuff happening with them as well. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that the agent is on the domain controller itself.
Yeah. So maybe that's more of a networking or performance decision why you would use that mirroring at that point, I would have thought.
Yeah, definitely. And when ATA was out, the agent that sat on the domain controller was very resource hungry. You did have to increase the RAM and things like that very a lot. But with the Azure ATP or the Microsoft Defender for Identity one, Microsoft streamlined its resources, made it very efficient. So we still tend to see organizations need to still increase their domain controller resources because they're being because they've done it to what they what is needed potentially, or maybe they've undersized a little bit to save costs, maybe save space on the hypervisor. But yeah, we've definitely seen domain controllers needing a little bit more.
So I assume that organizations must run Active Directory in the cloud. Is that right? Fair to say?
Yes. So we do have organizations that run it in clouds. So as in Azure, AWS, and GCP, or in third-party data centers.
So for instance, just specifically talking about Azure, if you are hosting Active Directory in Azure, is there a requirement for Defender for Identity? Is it the same? If so, is it the same deployment method for VMs?
Yes, it's same deployment. The only thing is that you can't do the gateway because you can't span port mirror.
Yeah.
In the same way, you can on premise you can do that with even with virtual machines. You do it with Hyper-V. Yeah, with Hyper-V, VMware, things like that. You can do that still, but within Azure or the other clouds you can't. So you have to use the agent to do the deployment.
Yeah, because I obviously have seen quite a lot of confusion when it comes to, I'll call them on-premise technologies being hosted in Azure, right, and getting confused with cloud technologies, right? You could kind of argue that Active Directory in Azure could be mistaken for Azure Active Directory, right? if that makes sense, right? Yeah. So I think it's probably worth calling out that these on-premise technologies have also made their way to the cloud, and rightly so in a lot of scenarios. But also we still need to apply the same sort of tooling and visibility even to those cloud resources. It's still our responsibility to manage and monitor these services in the cloud.
Yeah, definitely, especially when it's infrastructure as code, because that's in effect that is just a data center, isn't it? In Azure, it's just in Azure at that point. Still, somewhat technically classes on premise kind of view, I guess, isn't it?
Sorry, do you mean infrastructure as a service, not infrastructure as code?
Yeah, infrastructure as service. Yeah,
Okay,
that's right. It's because we've been doing IAC as well, and it's the buzzword for our podcast.
Sorry, the the acronym flew into my brain, and I was like, and then you were talking about actual. I was thinking, there's going to be something to do with like, what's the difference with terraforming this?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's great. That's all cool.
Infrastructure as service.
Okay, yeah, that's all cool. So how is it licensed?
So it's licensed per user. That's in Active Directory. So, well, it's licensed per user that is synchronized up to. It's synchronized users synchronized up to Azure AD, but you do have to make sure you're covering a lot of your. It's basically, in effect, you've got to cover all of your active users. In effect, not necessarily service accounts, things like that, or directly admin accounts, but definitely your primary users that are currently active on there, because it's, in effect, it's a standalone license. It's a subscription, so you can buy it through. You can have it as the EMS E5 or the Microsoft 365 E5 security add-on, or the full E5. So that's how it's licensed. I don't know what the cost is of it off the top of my head, but yeah. So you just gotta make sure you're covering all of your active end users.
Active real users, right?
Active real users,
humans that are using it. And did you say if they have multiple accounts, you don't need to worry about multiple licenses per user? It's just it's 100 users in your org. You buy 100 licenses for it, or
correct? Yeah, as long as you're like I said, you're covering your active, your human active users.
And there's no restrictions on the amount of Active Directory servers that I've got.
Nope. No, it's all user based.
Okay, so you don't pay per agent that I deploy or anything like that.
No.
What about ingest, network costs? Is that all covered?
There's no additional cost. Obviously, if you've got the service in a cloud, your egress from that cloud may cost you. So if you from Azure out to the service, there may be a cost there, but that's standard for servers in Azure and their egress.
Yeah, or if you're in AWS, for instance.
Yeah, exactly.
You would pay your egress from AWS to talk to Azure, I assume.
Well, to the Defender for Identity service.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no additional cost, because I'm guessing the way to probably look at it is that, in theory, if you've got 100, if you've got 1,000 users or 10,000 users, it kind of, they're only going to be being theory active. They're only going to have a percentage of activity or authentications, aren't they, across your estate? So it should sort of scale with the users in that effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So we talk, we hear a lot about XDR. How does identity fit into extended detect and response?
Yeah, so Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, and Defender for Office were always it was Azure ATP previously, but a couple of years ago, but they were the sort of first three services that kind of communicate with each other and started that sort of XDR story with Microsoft. So it ties in because it allows the Microsoft 365 Defender portal to see the authentications happening on your Active Directory, but then it can also see Defender for Endpoint, so it can start sort of mapping. It's that sort of better to get together, because we can correlate the information. So we start seeing an attack on Active Directory, and then we can start looking into which endpoint is now doing that, because then and then we can go to Defender for Endpoint information and start seeing the unusual activity that this user's signed in that they never do on this device. We can then get all the detail about what they're actually running. Maybe they are running a toolkit on there, which then can be disrupted by Defender for Endpoint at that level. So not necessarily just disabling the user, but actually stopping the software that's running, or the attacker that's in on that device itself, and stopping them from actually jumping to another account somewhere else. And then then you can look at Defender for Office to then see how something got in. Maybe there was a phishing attack or a malware execution that was 0 day, that maybe Defender it was so new that Defender couldn't quite catch it quick enough. 0-day is 0-day. We try our best to capture it, but as long as we as soon as it's out or happening, we disrupt it as soon as we can. Maybe we've detected that an email came through and another 100 people got it. We can use the Defender for Office to then go off and purge those emails out and get rid of it. And then we've all got that all in one instant. So identity is a key part to XDR. It's what we now know is the new front door, the new perimeter. Organizations or attackers, I should say, aren't attacking endpoints as much anymore because EDR technology has come so far now. It's now trying to grab the credentials and attacking that way.
Thanks for that, Alan. Yeah, that makes a huge amount of sense. And like you say, the traditional IT security perimeter is highly fragmented now, right? Like you say, the value is in identity. That's a key area of focus now, right? So having layering on any sort of technology that you possibly can, especially looking at these more traditional silos of identity, right, of on-premise identities, and especially as how hyper connected, I think, as you spoke about earlier, these identities are synchronized into the cloud. Then once you get hold of a singular identity, you can effectively use it in multiple places, right? If you got hold of that identity on-prem, you could then use it in the cloud, and potentially even vice versa, right? So yeah, having that correlation between this tool, Defender for Identity, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office, getting that singular pane of view and that singular vision to help you respond to these incidents is really powerful. Definitely.
Yeah, and you've also got obviously your identity protection for Microsoft Entra ID, so that ties into the whole XDR piece. So you're looking at both sides to your hybrid identity.
Yeah.
At that point as well.
Cool, great. Thanks for that, Alan. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover? Anything you think we've missed?
No, I think that's all for it. It's a really, I say, simple tool, but it's very specific on what it needs to do, and it's very good at it. So it's not, it's not it's like some of our other products like Defender for Cloud, where there's hundreds of things that are amazing about. Well, there are amazing things about this, but 100 amazing things in different areas that we could spend hours on, kind of thing. It's definitely a tool that is matured and nailed what it needs to do.
Yeah, narrow in focus, but sort of deep in functionality, right? It's just one core area that's really important. So
yeah, very critical. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Previous episode, Alan? Anything that somebody might want to go back and listen to that's related?
I can't think of anything right now. I mean, obviously, looking at any of my Defender ones would probably tie into it. We did do a Defender for Office, season 3, episode 6. To kind of looking at that side of things. But no, I can't think of anything else.
Okay, cool, great.
Okay, so what's the next episode, Sam?
Yeah, so next week, I'm going to sort of keep it in the security sort of realm, and we're going to be looking at Microsoft Purview Insider Risk Management. So yeah, we're going to dive into what insider risks are, potentially in your organization, how you should have visibility of those risks, and if there is an incident that is flagged from that discovery, then actually wrapping a management process around it as well. A lot of what we talk about is either cloud solutions or security solutions. It's highly technically focused, but a lot of the time our these incidents are driven from human beings. Well, they've always got a part to play. Those pesky pesky users. I sound like a character from Scooby Doo or something like that. So we'll just dive into insider risk management. It's a really good tool for getting visibility. So yeah, I want to sort of take everybody through it.
Okay, great. It sounds like it's going to be a good episode. Okay, so did you enjoy this episode? If so, please do consider leaving us a review on Apple or Spotify. This really helps us to reach out to more people like you. If you have any specific feedback or suggestions, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact with us.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far, thanks ever so much for listening, everyone. Catch you next week.
Yep, thanks all. Speak soon.